late for this meeting? Huh.
Hi guys.
Good evening.
I'm a little concerned. We have two members that are going to be a little late.
Okay. Who do we have confirmed to even attend?
I didn't know that I thought Elizabeth was someone we hadn't heard from.
And I heard today Susanna's not coming.
Oh boy.
She emailed this morning that she most likely will not join.
So who's going to be late, Kathy?
Martha and David.
So,
and ask if there's any way that they can show up.
Get everybody else here, you're good. Well, look, Kathy, there are no votes that have to be taken tonight. So if you don't have the meeting, I'll just put everything. I won't put everything in an update because I don't have time to write everything I'm going to say, but I can send you the slides that are more complete than what you received earlier.
Okay. So we don't have to take any action on grant?
No action tonight.
Martha said she'll be here in about 15 minutes.
Who will?
Martha.
Well, your call whether or not you want to wait.
No, I think if we can have the materials sent. One, two, three, four. We only need one more body, right?
Yep.
Edith. Hi, Rebecca.
Hi there. Jill,
Hi.
nice to see you, Jill. First time we've seen your face.
Hi, everyone. Thank you.
How's it going, Jill?
Very well, thank you.
It's got a hard boss to work for, though.
I was just going to say, is she treating you okay?
She's treating me wonderfully.
No
Jill,
surprise there.
Are you any relation to Tom Corso?
No.
Oh, okay. I used to work with someone at UConn named Tom Corso, so
Ah,
I've never run into any other Corsos.
is he local?
Yes, I think he might live in Lebanon, but I'm not absolutely certain about that. So. Anyway. Kathy, I don't know if you saw Dave Latrico sent a text of saying he'd be a few minutes late.
Yeah.
Kathy, this is Rebecca. I'm having computer problems, but I think it's finally starting up. That's why I called for my phone. So I might in a minute disconnect from my phone and re-enter on my computer, just so you know.
Okay, thank you. Kelly said she's coming. She's trying to get in. She said it keeps saying it's an invalid passcode.
928295.
I don't know if we're on live yet, so maybe we'll email her the passcode.
I can text or email, absolutely. Yep, she's in the waiting room. I just let her in.
Great, thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you very much, Jill. Kelly, are you with us?
Yes, I just got connected.
Great, thank you very much. All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the August 19, 2021 special meeting of the Mansfield Board of Education. My name is Kathy Ward, the board chair. I'd like to call the meeting to order at 5:32 p.m. The public may view this meeting at mansfieldct.gov/video. And first, I would like to give a big welcome to Jill Corso, our new administrative assistant for the superintendent and the Board of Ed. Welcome aboard, and thank you for joining us. So Jill, would you call the roll, please?
Certainly. Thank you, Kathy. Kathy Ward,
Here.
Susanna Everett,
She is absent.
Martha Kelly,
She will be late.
Edith Allison,
Here.
Rebecca Aubrey,
Here.
David Latrico,
He will also be late.
Catherine Paulus,
Here.
Elizabeth Verge. It appears Elizabeth is not here.
Correct.
And Kelly Zimmerman.
Here.
Great, thank you, Jill. And if you could note whenever the other folks that are going to be late, if you could note what time they joined us.
Absolutely.
Oh, great, thank you. All right, that brings us right to our information, presentations, and actions. The final ARP ESSER grant application. Kelly?
Great. Jill, I'm sorry. I just noticed that my screen share is disabled. Are you able to give me screen share rights? Do you know how to do that? So click on participants. And then if you put your cursor over my name, you'll see a button that says more. Does that work? Make me co-host, maybe? There we go. Great.
Did that work?
It did. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. So I have an enhanced slide deck. I sent you some of the slides, and I have since added onto this slide deck so it will allow me to go through, I think, all of the items under information. So I'm going to encourage you to speak up, and I'm going to try to do each of the agenda items one at a time, but please speak up with your questions. And Kathy, if you're okay with that, I'll just keep going through the agenda.
That sounds perfect.
Okay, great. So the first thing that I wanted to share with you was the final application for the ARP ESSER funds. So it's a lot of acronyms, but ARP stands for American Rescue Plan. And as I've shared with you previously, those were federal funds made available by the most recent administration sometime this spring. They are funds that we can use to support the effects of the pandemic on our schools from the time they were adopted, which was in March of 2021, through September of 24. So we have 3 years to use this funding. Mansfield received a sizable award. In fact, it changed. They added about $5,000 to us sometime in June. So the total award was $755,311 to be used again over a 3-year period, or any way we'd like within that 3 years. 20% of that award, or $151,062, must be set aside to support what the federal government has termed learning recovery. In other words, to support the academic growth of students. And you'll see that, in fact, almost all of our award is for that purpose. So a couple of other requirements: that 20% set aside can be used for things like summer learning or enrichment programs, extended day learning, to provide comprehensive after school or care or extended school year programs. The grant also requires that we use the money to provide interventions to respond to such things as academics, social, emotional, and mental health needs of students, especially those disproportionately impacted by the pandemic. It's not required that you respond to all of those needs, but you'll see that we in fact are. Also, we needed to describe how the funds would be used to implement prevention and mitigation strategies if we were using them in that way, which you see for the most part we are not, because we've been able to manage our prevention and mitigation strategy funding needs through other grant funds. Most importantly, we needed to engage our stakeholders in a meaningful way to help us create both our plan, and we needed to describe how we engage those people in our application. So I'll come back to that in a moment, but I want you to know that the grant structure requires that we address any of our grant application requests in one of 5 categories defined as state priorities by the state, and I'll show you those in a moment. For each of the strategies that we want to implement, we need to define how we're going to implement the strategy, when we're going to do it, who's going to be responsible for it, and how we would identify our desired outcomes or the impact of that strategy. So these are the 5 state priorities. And you can see that academic support is the first one, family and community connections, the social, emotional, and mental health, strategic use of technology, staff development, and the digital divide, and then building safe and healthy schools.
Kelly, I'm just curious, what accounts for the size of our award?
Oh, good question. It's based on, so this is what the federal government calls an entitlement grant. We receive other entitlement grants. In fact, there are the grants known as Title I and Title II. It's directly related to the poverty index, or the number and percentage of students from low income households.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. So if you look, there's a place where I can see the award given to every community. So obviously it's your poverty level and the size of your community, right? So Hartford, which has a much higher poverty level and is a much bigger place, received tens of millions of dollars. But some communities near us that have very, very little poverty and are about our size received just, like $60,000. So it's interesting to see, but it's all based on federal formula.
Thank you.
That's determined by our free and reduced lunch?
In large part. I believe there are some other indicators that come into play as well, but yes. And just so you're aware, our free and reduced lunch numbers for, I just pulled those recently, our free and reduced lunch numbers for the 2021 school year were just under 30%. That is an increase over what we've experienced in previous years. Even in my tenure in 6 years here, I think we've been as low as about 23 or 24%. And so now we're hovering right around 30%. How did we engage our stakeholders, and what did we do to identify how we wanted to spend this $755,000? The first thing we did, and this was actually required in the second round of funding. Remember, this is the third round, but the second round of funding, known as the ESSER 2 grants, required us to conduct a needs assessment. Part of our needs assessment was understanding what our stakeholders desired. And we tried to do this work in concert with the new strategic planning work that we were doing. So we used the input that we gathered from the community surveys and the focus groups that I did with schools and students, as well as the work that you all did with our administrators to help us identify where our needs were and what was important to the community. From there, we looked at the work of the district and those priorities and strategies that we had already identified for ourselves that we knew we wanted to be able to continue. We also wanted to really understand the needs of our students. So as an administrative team, we looked at a tremendous amount of data, not just hard quantitative data, but also we looked at surveys from students and families. We looked at incidents of special education identification. We looked at the number of hours of service and what categories our special ed students were in. And we looked at some of our local performance data, especially in literacy. We knew we wanted to make an investment also in building the capacity of our teachers, what we call tier 1 instruction, the foundational instruction that happens in the classroom. Finally, as we went through this process, we wanted to avoid what's being called the 2024 cliff. What that means is that as you identify how you want to spend these funds, if you use a lot of your funding to purchase or to buy, to finance additional staff, when these funds go away in 2024, you're left with having to reduce those positions or find another funding source, including your operating budget, to keep those positions going. So that was important to us, that what we were doing was really building our foundation and our capacity without creating a situation where we'd find ourselves needing to increase our operating budget to keep things moving forward. And then using all of the information we'd been gathering, we determined our focus areas. And you've seen these before. I've shared these with you throughout the spring. We identified 3 big areas: supporting student learning, addressing the needs of the family and the whole child, and focusing on our structures and systems. And by this, I mean everything from not just things like technology use, but really, how do we structure school? How are we designed to provide supports for students? What's our internal organizational structure? What kind of programs do we offer? And how well have we defined and built the capacity to provide the learning design, the instructional practices that we seek? So one other thing I should mention is that along with the work that I've described of engaging the community, we also did a final review with a group of parents, community members, a member from the Board of Ed, a member from Mansfield Youth Services, and also some staff. Some teachers. And this is a group that has met throughout the year as our wellness committee. Also, I forgot there was one other element of our needs assessment. We also met as a full administrative team with the full Youth Services Bureau to really understand what collectively we saw as needs and how to move that work forward. And I have to say that all of the work that we did leading up to this grant and the development of our new strategic plan is really, I think, solidifying and making stronger the initiatives that we had in place and continuing to move the work forward rather than setting a new course. But that final review resulted, because it was a diverse group, resulted in some really nice conversation, not just about what we were doing, but how we could do the work together. And it also identified some additional things that we could include in the grant. So the process, all in all, although quite labor intensive, was really very helpful. So in the end, this is what we've identified. So under the topic of, or the priority of learning acceleration, we will be using some funds to purchase some staff for extended day services. We are looking to hire some tutors to support reading at the transition years, so K1 and grade 5 initially. We are intending this to be intensive 2-year support that does, in fact, sunset. This is really intended to work with the students who we think were most vulnerable during the pandemic and to provide them that direct support and extra boost that they need. Should we find that we're able to meet the needs over the course of the year with all of the students in those transition grades, K1 and 5, then we would extend these supports to older students in our elementary and middle schools. But the other thing I want to mention is we're hoping to provide these supports outside of the school day, meaning just before school begins or just after school ends. A lot of that will depend upon transportation. And when we can't extend the school day, we will provide supports to students during the day. Likewise, we know that we need to support our students in mathematics instruction, and so we've put some money in the grant to do some professional learning in that area and to look at some intervention programs that are available in mathematics. That does not require additional staffing. We found that there's a great need for us to do more to support students' mental health needs, and that led to a big discussion about looking much more carefully at the structure of our special education programming. And so we are going to be doing it, you'll see later, both an audit of the special ed program and a redesign of some of our middle school programs designed to support students with behavioral and mental health needs. We have some money in here to hire a consultant to work collaboratively with all the Region 19 schools on assessment and reporting practices. We recognize that if we change our assessment and reporting practices alone, then our students may encounter something very different when they get to the high school. And so we're actually going to do this work collaboratively. It will be a middle school initiative with the high school and with the middle school in Willington. And we're hoping with the middle school in Ashford, they have a new superintendent. And so we're just getting into those conversations with him. As an administrative team, we are also going to engage in our own capacity building and thinking deeply about how to support students in their acceleration of learning and deepening their learning. We're doing that work with our friends at the Connecticut Center for School Change. We have money in this grant to bring teachers together and to plan programming to support students and staff as we transition to the new school. It's quite a bit of money there. Some of that is going to be used to give teachers as much as 5 additional days next summer to work together and to prep for the new school and to provide our paras with some additional work time in the summer as well. We're going to be building out a student ambassador program that allows our students to understand, our elementary students especially, to understand the workings of our new net zero school and to be prepared to serve as tour guides in the future once we get into the school. This will also include instruction to all students in understanding the sustainability and net zero elements of our new school. That will be done through an outside consultant, educational consultant, and our enrichment teachers. And finally, we are looking at our enrichment program structure, and we're going to run a pilot at Goodwin School this year, thinking about how we engage more community partners in this work across all classrooms, providing experiences to all students, the types of experiences that they might not otherwise have an opportunity to engage in. So I'm going to stop there because that's a lot of information, and just see if you have any questions on that priority. Okay, hopefully you're all still with me. That is the bulk of the grant. As you can see, what remains, we're putting into family and community connections and a few other areas, but here we want to build on the great work of our CARES teams last year and create, using an incubator process, sort of a study and pilot process to build family partnership teams at every school, and to provide some funding to support engagement activities, as well as being able to, we're in the process of building out quite a few new documents for parents. So engaging some translation services to make sure that we can equitably provide those written materials to all our families. I mentioned the social, emotional, and mental health would include an evaluation of our student support services program. That's going to be a significant district-wide evaluation, again, with a focus on social and emotional health, but recognizing that we need to look at the whole scope of what we do and provide there. And we also want to be able to provide some wellness opportunities and experiences for staff. We all know what staff have experienced in the last 18 months. And the remaining funds will be to support technology needs, primarily software needs. So that is our application. We submitted it about a week ago. It was due this Monday. It is allowable for us to revise that grant throughout the grant process. So if we get a few years down the road and we find we missed something or our needs have changed, we can go in and make revisions to the grant.
So Kelly, I know this was a tremendous amount of work on your part, but I'm really, really happy to hear that you feel that there are benefits to doing it. Obviously very well thought out, and avoiding that cliff is a big issue too. So great work, great work.
Thanks. So, any other questions?
When will you hear about the application? Or
from what I'm judging from some of my colleagues, about they're actually doing a pretty quick turnaround, about 10 days to 2 weeks. Although we submitted a little bit closer to the due date than people who had experienced that, so it might be a little bit longer. But it's important to note that these are entitlement grants, meaning that this is money we are entitled to. So it's not a matter of accepting or rejecting. It's a matter of making sure that what we're proposing meets the expectations of the state. So if there's something with the grant that they have questions about or that they're concerned about, we're given the opportunity to rework it.
Kelly, were you able to allocate all of the funds to different programs?
So you broke up a little bit there, Kelly. Was I able to do what with all of the funds?
Oh, sorry. Were you able to allocate, like you used all the funds in your budget?
Oh, yes. Yep.
Okay,
If
great.
you add up all those numbers, it's $755,000. Yep.
Awesome. I think you have some really comprehensive details in there. So thank you for your time with it.
Sure. Okay. If we're good, I'll move on. The next item on the agenda is reopening schools. I'm sure you received a communication from me last evening, early evening. So it's been a little bit challenging doing communications this summer. The state, the other thing I think you'll remember is that the ARP grant required us to also produce a continuity of learning plan, which had to be published by the end of June. So at the end of June, we updated our reopening plan from last year, and we made it a continuity of learning plan. And we described how we assumed in June we'd be opening schools or continuing schools in September. We knew that the state was going to be issuing new guidance. I think what happened is they were preparing new guidance based on our experiences in June and early July, only to have the Delta variant pop up and intensify. And so they continue to, I suspect, reconsider the guidance. So we were issued interim guidance in late July with the understanding that the final guidance would be around the corner. So I thought, well, I'll wait till I have the final guidance before I communicate to families. But in fact, it is now August 19th and I don't have final guidance yet. I do have the advantage, though, of these Tuesday morning meetings again with the Department of Public Health and the Department of Education. And so I've been taking information from those meetings and considering it the official guidance from the state. So that it slowed me down a little bit in communicating to families. So what I published yesterday may not be every detail of reopening, but I think it's pretty darn close, with one exception, which I will get into for a moment. So just as we consider reopening, I've organized this into a couple of categories. One is operations. So the thing that's most important for you all to know is that we are statutorily required to have students experience in-person learning 180 days a year. Until the pandemic in March of 2020, there was no such thing as a defined remote learning day in Connecticut. And in fact, there's no legislation that allows for anything but in-person learning. The reason we were able to provide remote learning and hybrid instruction during the pandemic was because we were operating under a state of emergency. That state of emergency allowed the State Board of Education to alter statutory requirements. It was actually the State Board of Education that gave us the authority to allow remote learning last year. That state of emergency is no longer in action. It has been sunsetted, and the legislature took no action during their session to create any allowances for remote learning for the upcoming school year. They did pass legislation to allow the State Department of Education to create a proposal for high school remote learning beginning in the 22-23 school year. The purpose of that is more about extending and providing more opportunities. But there is no legislation anywhere right now that allows us to provide remote learning. So the goal is to provide operations that allow us to keep schools open for all students 5 days a week, full time. I will also add that we no longer can use remote learning for inclement weather days either.
Kelly, I had a question on that.
Yeah.
Since it's the 180 days in person, is there anything that creatively can be done if we exceed dates and have our 2 extra days?
So we could say that the first 2 snow days will be remote learning days because they're not statutorily required. But that's about the extent of it. One year, Kelly, I don't remember if you were on the board, we had so many inclement weather days that we reduced the student days to 180. And
yeah, I was, and that's more what I was thinking. Like if we got to the point where we had snow day, say we had 5 snow days and we maxed out our calendar,
right,
could then the next 2 be virtual days, so we're still getting the 180 in person?
Right. Yes, the answer is yes, we certainly can.
Okay.
Yep. So I will say that we've had a few phone calls from parents wondering if there's any way their children can receive remote learning. And, unless, as we always have, for children with special needs or children with health conditions, we've always provided non-school based educational programs. But unless there are those kinds of conditions, we do not have any authority to provide remote learning. So again, I think that was clear last spring. I shared with families that there is no required, that time there was no required remote learning, and then being able to share this week a final statement on that. I think it should be clear to families.
Question. I know you're saying it's clear, but do enough of them really understand that there's going to be a few, because they have to wear a mask, who will refuse to do it? So we're prepared for those?
So good thing you brought masks up. That's on my next slide, but I'll address it now, Dave. Again, we do not have the authority to allow children or staff to be in school without masks. Masks must be worn in schools as well as a few other facilities based on an executive order that the legislature granted the governor the authority to enact. And that executive order is in place until September 30th. So should a child come to school and refuse to wear a mask, we have no option but to call the parent and have the child picked up, because we cannot have children in a school building without masks.
Kelly, I have a question going back to the slide that we were on. We used to be 183 days, and we reduced to 182. Yeah. Was that a permanent reduction?
We did that in a calendar about 5 years ago. We made an additional teacher day, and we have continued with that balance of 182 student days and 7 professional days.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Kelly, may I ask what, I'm not sure if it's under this slide or not, but what are we doing about students that have to be quarantined, receiving instruction?
Yep, good question. So we do have an obligation, obviously, to provide instruction to students who have to be home because of quarantine. And in that case, the state does give us some limited authority to consider a student present in school if we meet certain criteria. It's about, they have to complete 50% of the work or attend 50% of the school day if you're doing it synchronously. And we've always had plans to support students who had to be home for a long period of time, due to illness or other needs. And so administrators and teachers will work with individual families on that. There are some students who will want to Zoom into classrooms. There are other students for whom that's too distracting. There are some classrooms that it's easy to accommodate students on a screen, and others where that doesn't work. Think of, related arts types of programs. So we'll create individual plans as we need them.
So a Zoom is a possibility if they're out?
Yes, it is a possibility.
Awesome.
Yeah. Is that Catherine?
Yes.
Sorry, your voice sounded different. Okay. So a couple of other things about operations. Last year, we changed our policy on school visitors, which gave me a little more authority to restrict school visitors based on need. We will be less restrictive this fall, but we will still be limiting visitors in some manner, and principals will be communicating that directly to families. Our bus operations are essentially unchanged in that we will still be able to operate full buses. Students must wear masks on buses, not just because of the governor's executive order, which requires it, but also because of the federal masking requirements on public transportation. So think airports, subways, city buses, and school buses. They're all considered public transportation. And we will still have loading and unloading protocols on buses with assigned seats so that should we need to contact trace, we'll be able to do that. The travel advisory still recommends that unvaccinated people who travel out of state quarantine when they return home and are tested. That has been communicated to our families. I will continue to notify our community of positive cases when they present themselves in the schools. And as I mentioned, we've got the continued partnership with Department of Public Health and also with Eastern Highland Health Department, which has been incredibly supportive and helpful to us throughout these last 18 months. So the mitigation strategies will continue with masks, we'll continue with distancing, although the distancing studies have shown that 3 feet distance is adequate. And so we will be organizing classrooms with 3 feet distancing. Hand hygiene will continue, meaning we sanitize hands in and out of every classroom, and we will continue with contact tracing. And if you read yesterday's long communication to families, you'll see that there have been a few changes in who we have to identify as direct contact. The primary change is that when students are wearing masks and sitting in classrooms kind of sedately, so not an active kindergarten classroom necessarily, but an older grades classroom where kids are mostly at desks, if they are 3 feet apart and in masks, they do not need to quarantine if they're a direct contact, only if they are closer than 3 feet. And here's the new news. We know that the #1 mitigation strategy is vaccination. And at 4:00 this afternoon, the governor announced that there will be a mandatory vaccination or testing regimen required of all school employees. We do not have all the details on that yet. We received some preliminary information this afternoon about this so that we were not shocked when we heard the 4:00 press conference. But we have another meeting with the commissioner tomorrow morning, and I expect we'll get much more information. But the press conference stated as the date September 27th. So the expectation is that all school employees will have at minimum their first dose and an appointment for a second dose by September 27th. If they do not do that, and we don't know the details of this yet, but my understanding there is some allowance for weekly testing. But again, it's unfortunately, this all just broke this afternoon and I don't know any of those details yet.
That's what I heard, that there was an opt-out for weekly testing.
Right.
Kelly, I think I also heard today that, or maybe I read it somewhere else, that teachers that are up in front of the classroom can take the masks off.
So I saw that on a slide during the press conference. It was never discussed. And so I don't know anything about that.
Okay. So if the executive order expires at the end of September in terms of mask requirement, does the Mansfield edict kick in and masks are required? And
yes, that's true. So 2 things can happen after September 30th. One is that the legislature can grant the governor executive powers to continue the mask mandate or any other executive order that has been identified as necessary. If the governor does not extend the wearing of masks beyond September 30th, then the authority of the town government, which is also available under executive order. So I don't know when that would sunset, but also under executive order right now is a town mandate for masking. Now, if that also sunsets September 30th, then there would in fact be no governmental requirement, but there could be a board policy for masking that you could implement. I know that there is nothing that prevents you from doing that. So we'll have to wait and see what happens in the coming weeks.
I think it'll be, and it could present a sensitive dynamic if there are teachers who are doing the weekly testing, if that is an option. The article, I'm interested to hear what you shared, because the article that I read sounded like they were just going to require vaccines for all employees and staff.
That was my initial, Kelly, that was my initial understanding as well. But what I heard in the press conference did not confirm that.
Yeah, no, that's fine. But that would make sense lining up with Lamont's mask mandate, that they would want that to happen by the end of September. So that logically makes sense. But I could see that being a very touchy subject if there's one or two staff potentially who are getting weekly tested, who have not gotten vaccinated, who would then maybe be required to continue wearing a mask indoors because they were unvaccinated. So I just feel like that's just something, it's not here or there, just something to be mindful of as we're moving through September.
Right. Can I just add something?
Sure.
Being in the healthcare field, whether you're vaccinated or you're not vaccinated, you should be wearing a mask, period.
I think a lot of people would agree with you. Okay, and so finally, the other thing that we're thinking about as we prepare to reopen schools is teaching and learning, of course. And so beyond the pandemic, we've had a great summer. We'll give you a more complete update of our summer efforts in September, but we are getting ready to share our core beliefs and the new strategic plan. The administrators had done a tremendous amount of work on this summer. I have some really exciting things to share with you in September. We will be focusing on supporting the whole child, and that will be an important message to staff, both in my preschool communications and also during convocation. Our focus is really on knowing the strengths of every child and starting from a position of strength with every child. And we've already planned professional development around this. And that includes use of good data, and not just state assessment data, but lots of data and evidence that we have about students. Making sure that we can provide the just-in-time supports that students need when they need those supports, and really using practices that empower students with their learning. We've spent a lot of time talking this summer about our written curriculum and what it really means to reach the level of students being able to develop a level of understanding that allows them to transfer what they know to new situations, and developing a deep sense of learning, and how to go about doing that in ways that the student really feels that they're at the center of the learning. And of course, we will do a tremendous amount to continue to build the capacity of our staff and to grow our own educators. And while we're talking about teaching and learning and convocation, I just want to remind you that convocation is always the first day all staff are back. This year, that's Monday, August 30th. We are going to be holding an outdoor breakfast at the middle school starting at 8 o'clock. And convocation will begin somewhere around 8:30. It will be a little bit shorter this year. It will be held in the auditorium, which seats hundreds of people, and there's lots of room for people to spread out in there. I expect it will probably only be about an hour, and then staff will scatter back to their own buildings. But we thought it was really important to bring people together this year, and we believe we can do it safely. And as always, you are invited, please, to join us for breakfast, and convocation. Just come to convocation, but it's really great to be able to introduce board members to staff and for you to be there as we kick off the new year. So any questions on any of the school reopening report?
Not a question.
Kelly,
but
this is
thank you for
Rebecca. I just had a
navigating this
question going. Oh,
Kelly, were you
right.
saying
This
something?
is Rebecca. I had a question.
Okay.
Can you hear me? This is Rebecca.
Yes.
Oh, okay. I had a question just going back to the vaccination, and I don't know. I feel like I asked this question before, and it wasn't something you necessarily had collected, but I know you also did staff vaccination clinics. I'm just curious if you have a feel for how many staff members have been vaccinated.
It's a good question. At the time of the vaccination clinic last March and April, we know that the attendance at the clinic would suggest that 70% of our staff attended the clinic. We also know that by the time we held the clinic, that we had some staff who had become eligible in other ways to be vaccinated. And we know that there were some staff that were unable to make the clinic who have since been vaccinated. So we were prepared to gather vaccination status of all staff this fall because we need it for contact tracing. But now the governor's order is going to require that anyway. So I will know very soon. But I suspect that, Rebecca, it's somewhere around 80% would be my guess.
Thank you. And then that just kind of raised another question. I know we work with a much younger population, but will you be also asking families to voluntarily report if their 12 and older students have been vaccinated? Like, is that helpful for contact tracing as well?
It is very helpful. And we made that request both last spring and again in the letter that went home yesterday. The other thing I should mention about vaccinations, if you're not aware, we worked with the governor's office early this summer, both E.O. Smith and Mansfield Public Schools, to provide vaccination clinics this summer. So we ran 2 clinics at the middle school and 2 clinics at E.O. Smith. The middle school was in July, E.O. Smith was in August. And Storrs Adventure Park has been running clinics regularly, the Mansfield Drive-In Health clinics, and we've been sending all of that information to our families. We also have data from Eastern Highland Health that is broken down by age category. So we know approximately how many or what percentage of 12 to, I can't remember now if it was 12 to 15 or 12 to 17-year-olds in Mansfield have been vaccinated. And I'm not going to give you that number because I don't want to tell you the wrong thing, but it is data that I have access to.
Thank you. I was just wondering more, in terms of contact tracing and for the school purposes. Yeah. Thank you.
Yep. And Kelly, did you have something to ask or share?
I was just thanking you for all of the work. I know that it's nothing compared to what you did last year, but it's a moving target and everything keeps changing. And I appreciate how little is still known about what the school year is going to look like. And I feel like you're as prepared as someone in your position can be for that. So thank you for your leadership with that.
Well, thanks. We keep saying we learned a lot last year. There was one difference to this summer. Last summer, in all honesty, about 80%, it felt some weeks, 80% of our efforts were focused on operations. This year, I would say, 70% of our efforts have been focused on teaching and learning issues and efforts. And we've still had to give additional efforts to operations, but I am pretty excited. I think we found a good balance. We're going to try to keep that balance throughout the school year, but I am pretty excited about what we're going to be able to advance this year with teaching and learning, even during a pandemic. Let me try to finish up the agenda, I'll go back to the slides and share with you a little bit about what we've done in the area of equity. So I know that you all are aware of the Equity Institutes we offered this summer. Thank you very much. We had 3 people from the board who were able to participate for those full 4-day institutes. And we've been working with our consultant to develop a plan to continue the trainings so that by October 12th, every staff member will, as a minimum, have experienced the first day of the equity training, and we are committed to ensure that all staff members receive the full experience by the end of this school year. Those of you who did participate know that the Institute required each participant to create an action plan for actions that will be taken this school year, so that we all together are leading with equity. And those action plans are very exciting, and they were developed at every level. Secretaries developed them, custodians developed them, or custodial directors. We haven't trained our custodians yet, but teachers, administrators, I mean, all walks of the school organization. We're going to bring back the cohort 1 and cohort 2, we're calling them, those people who experienced the trainings this summer. We're going to bring those people back on our October PD day to check in with them on the action planning and to give them some more support and opportunity to collaborate with others on continuing to advance that work. We also, likely with Kate England, our consultant's support initially, will develop an equity advisory committee that will be made up of both school staff and parents, and hopefully some students as well, who will look at the results of the equity audit that is underway and help us think about how we live our core belief on equity. That will be an ongoing committee, and I'm pretty excited to get that started and to get multiple voices at the table in this work. And part of their work will be helping us develop an equity stance. So a statement that ultimately I will bring to the board for you all to work with in the hopes that we can present a united front, if you will, to the community with a strong statement about what our Lead with Equity core belief really means to us. Any questions on that?
I just want to say, Kelly, as someone who had the privilege of attending the Summer Institute, I just thought it was absolutely amazing and eye-opening to me, to realize how much this is embedded in everything that we do. So thank you for doing this, and I look forward to seeing what happens with it in the future. It was a great opportunity.
Great, thank you. So if there's nothing else about equity, I'll move on to the construction updates. I'm really excited to show you this picture.
Holy mackerel.
Yes, this is the first of the foundations of the school. They've actually broken the school up into stages A, B, and C. And I don't know which part of the building, if this is A, B, or C, but this was poured last Friday. And I was on the construction site on Tuesday. And so it is really happening. And the conversations, we have meetings with the construction team and the architects and the owners, us, every 2 weeks. And the conversations talk about the current state of the work, what's happening in the next 2 weeks, and then beyond 2 weeks, where we are on the schedule and what's coming up. And it's just really exciting to hear them talk about things that are so concrete and tangible now. So it's pretty exciting. Southeast School, if you've driven past it, looks like an island unto itself there, with surrounded by dirt, but they will get that all cleaned up and ready for school in the next week and a half.
Kelly, were they able to save Southeast Playground?
Yes, the Southeast Playground will be in operation this year. including moving the swing set so that we can make sure the kids still have swings. There might be a small piece of it that had to come down, but I have to say this construction firm has been so responsive, and they're making sure that we've got enough space to play on as well. And anytime we raise a concern about the impact on students, their response is, let me rethink this. So they've been great to work with.
So the stuff that has been taken out will eventually be put back?
So the new playground actually will include the play set from Vinton School, which is quite new, and additional equipment as well.
And is there a climbing thing?
Is there what?
I don't know what else to call it, but a climbing thing. We used to have one at Goodwin where kids could climb up and climb around. You know, it was like that particular one was a dome. Some of them looked like castles.
Yeah, there are. I'm trying to remember what's at Vinton. There's actually a spider net to climb, I think.
Oh,
yeah, it's a really nice place set. And when it was installed, even it was before the referendum, but it was installed in such a way so that it could be moved. And there's also been discussion about anything that has to be removed from Southeast being relocated elsewhere in town. So
okay.
If not on a school site, somewhere for kids to use.
Good.
Yeah.
Because those PTO spent a lot of money on that.
Yes. Yep.
Kelly, if I may.
Sure.
We are still on schedule and we haven't experienced any major issues with procuring equipment and materials and supplies.
So there are two different answers to that. We are still on schedule. And yes, there have been some issues with procuring materials, but what they've been doing is constantly adjusting the schedules, the big schedule, so that the completion date doesn't change. And they've been very strategic in ordering materials. So they know some materials are going to take 6 months to get. They typically would order them 2 months ahead. They've already ordered them, so they've really been watching the markets carefully. And we also are starting to see the markets loosen up. So we're really very hopeful.
Very exciting.
Yeah, I believe you requested in September for us to have a longer presentation about the timeline. And so we'll be working with likely our owner's reps, Colliers, to be able to come and provide that to you.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. And the other good news is I was at the middle school today, and I think I was actually behind the transport vehicle earlier this week. Roofing material has been delivered to the middle school. Not all of it, but at least we're getting started with that. So as I shared with you, I think in June, that project is going to happen second shift, late fall. And we've not received any indication that can't be done. So we're hopeful that before the snow's set, we will have a new roof on the middle school.
Where is the material being stored? Where's the staging area at the middle school?
So the bus loop,
Mm-hmm.
and there's sort of that gully there with gravel, not gravel. There's some grass. Do you know where I mean? Like, so you come around the bus loop or you come up the bus loop and just to the left of it.
Oh, okay.
That's where they're staging.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yep. So that would be the entire agenda, just a special meeting to give you the summer update and make sure you were aware of how we were managing those grants and getting school ready to reopen.
Great job. Great job.
I just had a question about any proposed enrollment figures.
Good question. We are not seeing a significant increase in enrollment. We did have the increase in Vinton's kindergarten, which I think I mentioned to you last June. We were starting to see it. That has materialized. And so we did add an additional kindergarten teacher at Vinton. But other than that, we have not seen any increased enrollment.
are there families who have decided to have more families decided to homeschool?
We know of one family that is traveling, who will be homeschooling because of travel, and one family who has two families who have inquired about homeschooling until a vaccine is available, but nothing finalized.
Anyone else have any questions or comments?
Yeah, Kelly, I have a question for you.
Sure.
Are we supporting the homeschool group at all? Because in the past, it was kind of a them versus us. And we did open up that they could join into the after school programs, with the exception of stuff that transpired during the day, for example, plays. So I'm just wondering if we're still kind of welcoming them, because I think that's a really good way to get them in school.
We've had no requests for any participation in any of our after school programming. As I think of the homeschool list, many of the children are elementary age, not middle school age.
No, I'm just saying that was one of the things that we did do for the homeschooling community. I just want to make sure that we're giving them support that they may need, because I know in the past it was kind of like, nope, school or nothing.
So other than those after school opportunities, we don't have any other supports for homeschoolers.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Anything else? All right, well, thank you very much, Kelly. Excellent job. And best of luck with the opening.
Thanks. I hope some of you can join us on Monday morning, August 30th.
All right.
Okay. Have a good night, everyone.
Thank you very much, Kelly.
Okay.
I'll accept a motion to adjourn.
I'll motion.
Thank you, Kelly. A second?
A second. This is Edith.
Thank you, Edith. Are there any objections? Then we can say good night. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Jill, and welcome. Good night, folks.
Good night.
Bye.
Thank you again. Good night.